Hi, I'm Kate Averett. I'm the Outreach Manager at the Black Mountain College Museum and Arts Center, and I am the co-curator of our current exhibition, I Am a Citizen of the World, alongside our Program Director, Alice Seabrall. And in this exhibition, we are looking at historic pieces by Black Mountain College alumni and faculty, as well as contemporary responses to ideas of citizenship. A driving force of this exhibition is the global community of Black Mountain College, which was formed in large part with international influences from all across the globe. So here we have a piece that was done for us by Diamond Brand Gear, and we have these tags for each of the countries that was represented at Black Mountain College. So those really are across Eastern Europe, the Mediterranean, Latin America, and Asia. So in this exhibition, we are looking at the artists who are either first or generation immigrants and the way that those international influences shaped the college. So one of the themes of the exhibition that we're looking at is the idea of new citizens, and this idea of exchanging oppression for freedom. And a big catalyzing force for that is looking at those who were forced to flee Europe at the beginning of World War II, specifically those that were members of the Bauhaus art at the School of Art and Design in Germany, which was closed in 1933 due to Nazi antagonism. That happened to be the same year that Black Mountain College itself opened, and so there was a major influx of refugees and immigrants from Eastern Europe to the United States, and many of them found their way to Black Mountain College. One example of that is Josef Albers, who we have shown here in this piece Variant. Josef Albers led the art program at Black Mountain College from 1933 until 1949. He's very well known for his work in color theory and brought a lot of the Bauhaus principles of art and design to Black Mountain College, really showing how European models of education and of modernist art making really came into the pedagogy at the college. Another example of that is Ani Albers, the textile artist, who came with Josef in 1933 and founded the weaving workshop at Black Mountain College. A lot of her work has to do with ideas of materiality. Both of these artists were really influenced by Latin American artists and craftspeople. In part, were really drawn to coming to the southern United States due to its relative proximity to Mexico and Latin America. And so you can see these kind of textures that she draws from are very similar to pre-Columbian design. And a contemporary response to that is this piece here by Eric and Martin Demain, which is drawing on influences of both Josef and Ani Albers. It's obviously a textile piece using this hand-dyed yarn, as well as this linen, which has been folded and set into a pattern very similar to the paper folding patterns that were taught by Josef Albers to art students at Black Mountain College. So as part of this exhibition, we really wanted to look at contemporary artists who are looking at ideas of citizenship within the globalized world. And so we wanted to bring in as many voices as possible. This is an example of a piece by Mateo Lopez, who is a Colombian artist that uses Josef Albers' typeface to write the word truth. His pieces are almost like jigsaw puzzles, where they actually shift and move, and so you can create this idea of truth being distorted until it's no longer recognizable. So these kinds of plays on these modernist aesthetics by contemporary artists who are responding to the issues of our time were very important to us, especially when looking at this exhibition. Another example of this is the work of Steve Locke. These are pieces from Steve Locke's series Homage to the Auction Block. Locke does quite a bit of work looking at color theory, a principle that Josef Albers taught and wrote about and documented very heavily, but he brings the idea of color theory into race relations, specifically in the United States. And Steve has written an incredible kind of response to what citizenship means for him. And I won't read it fully, but this first sentence really stands out to us. Citizenship is a prize hard won for me by Citizenship is a prize hard won for me by a host of people I can neither name nor know. So his contributions of kind of looking at what does citizenship mean, specifically for an African American man, were really important to have represented, of course, and also this aesthetic relationship between his work and Josef Albers' work. And you can see here we have Steve's homage to the auction block alongside an original Josef Albers study for homage to the square. And the last piece in this section that I'll point out is this piece by an artist, Leo Amino. Leo Amino was born in Taiwan when it was under Japanese rule and worked for a great deal in the United States. And he was one of the first artists to utilize plastics and resin, which were really innovated on in World War II. So he's using these new materials to create these translucent designs. And he is an artist who has not received a great deal of recognition up to this point, and is starting to reach the levels of representation that he deserves, really. So we're excited about this, and we're looking forward to also doing a full exhibition of his work in the future. So as part of this idea of exchanging oppression for freedom, we invited a contemporary artist, Cheryl Rowland, to contribute this piece after the Wake Up. Cheryl is actually born in Asheville and spent most of his childhood and early adult life here, but was wrongfully incarcerated as a young man and spent several years in prison for a crime that he did not commit. So a great deal of his work really centers on that experience. This particular piece is drawn from his experience of painting cells between inmates. And he would find where inmates would carve their names or dates or quotes onto the wall, and then rather than filling in those gaps, it would just be painted over. So there would be these layers of stories of everyone who had lived and experienced that place. So as part of this exhibition, Cheryl poses questions. The question right now is, would you save the life of someone who is innocent? And the audience is invited to take this carving tool, and you really have to use some force and carve into the surface. And some people do a simple yes. Others respond with longer responses. And after the 2 weeks that this question is posed, it's painted over, and another question is then posed, and it continues on for the duration of the exhibition. And so this piece, which Liz and Al will speak on a bit more, is an installation, Building a Better Table and You're Welcome from Southern Equality Studios. We invited Southern Equality Studios to participate in this exhibition in large part due to their history of doing very publicly engaging work and work that is so immediate to issues that are going on right now, and especially when it comes to issues of inequality and representation. So this piece, Liz is demonstrating, it changes depending on how you interact with it. So there is a motion sensor which triggers a certain response, and then there are pressure sensors so that when you're invited to come and sit on this bench, you'll have this response here, have a seat, and then it will continue giving you prompts on how to engage and build a better table and create a more welcoming, equitable space in the world. And so we've had visitors come and respond to questions and kind of have this accountability of how they specifically will contribute to building a better table. So we look forward to that continuing over the run of the show as well. So another section of this exhibition is looking at figurative abstraction and the creation of identity and the construction of identity as it has to do with the creation of art. So of course, as we know, identity is an ever-changing thing. The way that identity is perceived by others and by yourself can be very flexible and malleable, but also plays such an important impact on how you walk through life. So what we really want to look at in this section of the exhibition is the way that that figures are represented in work, specifically in modernist work, and the way that abstraction of those figures allows for you to explore different variations on yourself and others. So we have an example here of Zanti Shawinski, who is an artist who came to Black Mountain College, originally a Swiss artist. And this is from his piece Spectodrama, which was performed at the college. And a great deal of his work and a lot of this Bauhaus theater that he brought with him is activating the body and activating principles of design like paper folding and light and shadow through dance and performance. So these are all examples of ways that costuming and performance and movement come into representations of how we can perceive the body and light and shadow and color in space. I also want to point out specifically this piece by an artist, Cynthia Homeyer, who is a student at the college. And she says, I got this idea from Philip Guston, years and years of struggle for a few moments of grace. And this is just a wonderful kind of abstract piece of her. She was an artist with a lot of, she had a lot of sense of humor in her work, and that really comes out here. But I also love this idea of bringing in Philip Guston and the way that he also represented figures in a very modernist way that raises a lot of different kinds of conversations. And so one conversation that we're really excited to have is between Sarah Carlisle Towery, who was an alum of Black Mountain College and went on to be an arts educator and a painter, an artist. Sarah Carlisle Towery started the Alabama Art Colony in 1992. It was a getaway that was initially started as a birthday celebration of hers and became this entire artist colony in Alabama. And one of her students was Onika Skatis. Onikas is now an Asheville-based artist, and this is one of his monumental paintings called Black Mountain. So we were really excited to have the opportunity to show his work alongside his mentor, Sarah Carlisle Towery. And Onikas really has found, through expression and through artwork, a way to move through expressions of his identity and of his time in the foster care system, and has really kind of seen artwork as a spiritual way of connecting with others and connecting inwardly with himself. So the third and final section of the exhibition is looking at this idea of Spaceship Earth. So Spaceship Earth was a concept of Buckminster Fuller's. Buckminster Fuller was an environmentalist, an architect, and a philosopher, and kind of had this idea that we all live on Spaceship Earth, but we don't have an operating manual for Spaceship Earth. So it's really up to us to find a way to sustainably live in this environment and work in a way that is cooperative and cohesive. So what I'm standing next to right now is an example of one of Buckminster Fuller's geodesic domes. This was one that we built specifically for this exhibition. And the geodesic dome was really an idea of how can you find the most internal space and structural integrity for things like housing that requires very little material and very low costs. So one of his ideas was you could create these domes and drop them anywhere and have readily accessible housing anywhere in the world. And the first successful geodesic dome was actually built at Black Mountain College. There was an initial test for the dome in 1948 that used Venetian blinds that they didn't expect to rise, and it didn't rise, so they called it the supine dome. It wound up laying across the ground. And then in 1949, they were able to successfully implement a geodesic dome at the college. So this here is a piece by Jean Varda, who taught at Black Mountain College. He was an extremely charismatic teacher and artist. The uncle, real debatably so, of Agnes Varda, the filmmaker. But Jean Varda was originally from Greece. And he does a great deal of, again, looking at this idea of figures and material and the way that he can represent the body, as well as these principles of light and movement. So here we have these incredible textures of burlap, bits of fabric put in with other materials and kind of layered together to create this, this motif. And he would do this on many different scales, but this is just an incredible representation of that work. He was also well known at Black Mountain College for the Greek party. So Gene Varda would never turn down a party, and parties were very common at Black Mountain College. So he got things going for this Greek party that happened in 1946 over the summer session when he was teaching. Students would wrap themselves in their bed sheets, and it was very kind of looking back at ancient Greece. They also built this Trojan horse, which has, you can see, these very Varda-esque figures kind of carried throughout it. But this is one of the really famous parties at Black Mountain, and this is something we've actually recreated on the original campus as part of our annual rehappening. Great. So we have two different artists that are represented here. We have Emerson Wolfer, who is an artist who is very much influenced by pre-Columbian art, which you can see here. And over here, we have the selection of pieces from M.C. Richards' collection. M.C. Richards was a poet and a philosopher and a potter who was on faculty in the college as well as a student of the college in the later years. And we don't really know the origin of these pieces, just that they were important to MC. They were recently gifted to the museum by Julia Connor, who's a friend of MC's. And this is what she referred to as her magical objects. So MC was a very well-traveled person and also assigned a lot of these kind of spiritual connections, particularly with ceramics and with the earth. So it's wonderful to see these examples of different clay bodies. She refers to this as an Egyptian fragment, as well as these kind of natural minerals of this desert rose. This is a piece by Javier Tellez, who is a Venezuelan artist who's working in New York. And this is actually on loan from the collection of Hetty Fisher and Randy Shull. And this, along with a few other pieces in the exhibition, were first shown in Asheville as part of their Viva exhibition a few years ago. But this particular piece, we really wanted to draw on ideas of the permeability of borders and kind of the way that borders can be imagined or unimagined. So we have this incredible still from a video where a man is literally shot as a cannon across the U.S.-Mexico border. So this really playful look at how we have these imaginary lines drawn in the sand that can so easily be crossed, and also doing that in a celebratory manner. So again, looking at this idea of borders, we also have this video piece from artist Grace Villamil. And Grace did this piece, Tayo, that was in the Kingston Deep Listening Center in Kingston, New York, and was very much influenced and inspired by Paulina Oliveros. And in this piece, Grace took many different kind of stuffed animals and put them together onto this wall, and then they came together and did a really conscious deep listening and deep vocalization measure that was done in solidarity with families that were separated by ice, and really kind of holding space for families and specifically for children in that way. And this is a short film that we were commissioned with Grace about the iteration of that project and the way that she went about creating that space. So again, looking at Spaceship Earth, we also want to represent as many of the faculty and students from the college from all across the globe as possible. And so throughout the exhibition, we have different pieces from first and second generation immigrants, as well as those artists who are responding to issues that have to do with the global world and with citizenship. I want to point out this relationship between Kenneth Snelson, who was a student of Buckminster Fuller, and the geodesic dome that we have on display. So this is a piece that utilizes the idea of tensegrity, or the relationship between tension and integrity. It's actually a very sturdy piece that is held together entirely by these wires and the relationship between the wires and these rods. So again, these are principles that really came out of an ecological and sociological basis that are then being utilized in the creation of new kinds of art. Here we have another piece from the collection of Hetty Fisher and Randy Shull. This is a piece by Ivan Argo, and this is La Turistas. And we particularly love this piece within the context of our location. We are just a few blocks away from Vance Monument in Asheville, which has been having very necessary conversations about removal of a monument that really stands for a slave owner in Asheville. And so as we see these debates and conversations and hopefully the tearing down of Confederate monuments across the South, we also wanted to bring into this conversation colonialism as a whole. And this piece we love. It's one of these interventions between these colonialist monuments being met with indigenous knowledge and art in a way that forces you to analyze what stories we preface in our histories and what stories publicly we often interact with. And a lot of this artist's work has to do with intervening with those stories and causing you to question why this person is being commemorated and what is being excluded from that narrative. So in this case, we're also looking at a few of the different faculty members and students of the college, as well as a few different elements of the global community there. One example is Mary Parks, also Mary Parks Washington, and she was one of the first African-American students to attend Black Mountain College. And in the quote that we have alongside here, she talks about growing up in Atlanta, in the segregated city of Atlanta, and how historic Black colleges were really one of the only spaces where there were these open conversations about race and between Black and white citizens. And so it's really a celebration of historic Black universities and also how she brought that experience with her to Black Mountain College. It was also a little bit of a culture shock for her. She had never worn pants before. So when she came to Black Mountain, she had to buy a pair of pants. And she talks a lot about the experience of kind of getting dirty and working on the land and working in the kitchen with the other students and faculty, and how that was a really foundational experience for her. We also have Nataraj Vashi and Pravina Mehta, who taught at Black Mountain College in the Summer Art Institute of 1949. Both were dancers, but Vashi was also a barrister, and Pravina was an architect and a social activist who played a role in the Indian independence movement. And a lot of what they taught at Black Mountain College was this idea of how to bring in the rhythms of Balinese and Hindu dance into things like architecture and philosophy. And another discovery that we found while working on this exhibition that really excited us was coming into the discovery of Quentin Kyles Miller, who is actually an Asheville native. That is very rare. Not many people at Black Mountain College were from Western North Carolina, and very rarely were they from Asheville. And so Quentin Miller actually went to Stevens Lee High School. He went on to become the first person of color to serve as superintendent in Asheville City Schools. His grandfather, who was born to his mother was enslaved, was a foundational brick mason and craftsman who built a great deal of the buildings that we have downtown in Asheville today. So Quentin Miller is just this incredible representation of the history of Asheville and its intersections with Black Mountain College. And again, it's wonderful to connect with his history here and also with his family who are still here in the city. So when Alice and I were starting to think about this exhibition, and while we were starting to think about it as a staff as a whole, we actually started off with this idea of democracy. Black Mountain College was really well known as a democratic space of learning. Specifically, John Dewey, who was a philosopher and an educator that the college really based a lot of its models on, once referred to Black Mountain College as a living example of democracy. And so, of course, as we've kind of been living through the last year and a half, decade, this idea of democracy and how we understand democracy has been so important to us. But beyond that, we started to think, how can we expand that idea beyond something like democracy, which can be somewhat divisive and also kind of can narrow in the conversation. And so we started thinking about citizenship. And in order to participate in a democratic society, you have to have a stake in that, and you have to be willing to contribute in some way. And also, that society owes you the protections and owes you the dignity as a citizen, no matter what that means, whether that's legal citizenship or just human citizenship. So based on that idea, we started thinking about Black Mountain College as a place that fostered citizenship that went beyond legal citizenship borders, and really came down to self-determination. And the way that the college came together with all of these global influences of people who were forced to flee their homes, who lost citizenship, who lost their place in the world, but carried with them into Black Mountain College this sense that they could create a better community than the one that they had left, or bring with them the best parts of their experience, and in adding that to the whole, create the community of Black Mountain College. And so, of course, we wanted to tie in contemporary artists who are having those conversations now. The conversations about citizenship that were happening then are as present today as they were then, and also there's so many new levels and layers that are being addressed by artists than there were in the 1930s, 1940s, 1950s. And so that's why we really wanted to bring forth narratives from many different artists who come at ideas of citizenship from their own perspective. So in inviting contemporary artists to be a part of this show, we wanted to make sure that as many perspectives are represented as possible. We're starting with this basis of Black Mountain College, and this idea of including contemporary artists alongside historic pieces is something that we've been doing for a few years now, really drawing forth how the conversations that we're having at Black Mountain College are so urgent today. And also looking at artists who are using new mediums, who are bringing together multidisciplinary approaches, things like projection and sound and new technology, as well as drawing from these really grounded experiences, such as Cheryl Rowland's piece, but also bringing in artists who have a global perspective on citizenship. Whether that be Steve Locke bringing in the diaspora and colonialism in his way, looking at the African American experience, as well as a great deal of Latin American artists that are really responding to colonialization in that way, as well as border crises and the way that we understand borders. So really one of our driving forces was just to have a look at what citizenship means outside the scope of the label of being a citizen, and what it means to be contributing to a more equitable world. So finding artists, especially finding artists who have this really wide varying perspectives, we kind of have to go at it in a lot of different directions. So one example is Southern Equality Studios. We were really familiar with their work, specifically that they were doing throughout the summer of 2020, really grounded in Asheville and social justice and visibility. And so we have been really excited to work with them for a while, and this seemed like the perfect opportunity to do so. And the same can be said for Cheryl Rowland, who is an Asheville-based artist, but an artist who's been working nationally and is now a grant recipient of the Creative Capital Grant. So his career has really taken off. But he came in the door a few years ago, and we met him, and he introduced himself, and we've just had a note sitting and waiting for years of when do we get to work with Cheryl. And so again, there's these perfect opportunities that arise. Same thing with Onika Skatis, who is another Asheville artist who we've been really looking forward to working with because of his direct connection to Black Mountain College, and finding an opportunity to bring his voice in and amplify his work has been really important to us. Other artists have come in through exhibitions that we've seen, specifically the Viva exhibition, as well as other exhibitions that have been done at 22 London Road with Hetty Fisher and Randy Shaw, who we're so lucky to have in Asheville because they have such an international collection of art. They're really bringing like the highest caliber artists who are working across the globe and exhibiting them in Asheville. So a great deal of the pieces in this show, including the one right behind me, came from seeing that work and those exhibitions and being able to reach out to Randy and Hetty as collectors and include that work within the show. So I think the question is, what do we hope viewers will get from the show? And I think that's kind of the driving force for curators, typically, is how do you tell a story that people can find themselves in, especially when we're looking at a historic narrative like Black Mountain College. People come in and oftentimes they have an artist at the college who they're so excited about, or there's a certain element of its history that people really connect with. And we like to have as many opportunities for people to engage with that as possible. But what's really fun is the ability to have people come in and question, what is my role in this? And especially for this exhibition about citizenship, there are several pieces that directly ask you, how can you contribute to a more equitable world? How do you perceive justice? What can you do as an individual to contribute to the whole? So again, with this excitement over Black Mountain College, I think a lot of people come in and they say like, oh, I wish that I could have been a part of the college community. And what we try to do is create spaces for people to engage in the way that they might if they were at Black Mountain.